So here's the difference between being a realtor, a real estate agent, and an investor. Real estate agents generally represent people that are trying to buy or sell their own personal homes. Investors are actually looking for properties either for themselves or for a property that they want to sell to somebody else, whether that's through a wholesale or through the third-party market, not necessarily through the traditional real estate market. In general, real estate agents are actually marketing their properties to a larger audience. And when I say that, I mean they have access to the MLS, they have access to syndicated websites like Realtor.com, Zillow. And so when they're advertising their properties, generally they're sending them out to a much larger audience. So as a real estate agent, you tend to get more market exposure. An investor has to market those properties, but they don't have as much access. So they send them through email lists, or they'll find wholesale lists that they can email them to buyers that are looking for wholesale properties. Real estate investment groups, for example. So you can tell they're just much smaller lists of people that you're sending them to. Now you can build a huge email list and you can get a pretty large email list to send it to, but in general, you're definitely not hitting the same audience you are getting a property on the MLS. So a real estate agent in general has more exposure. Another difference between a real estate agent and an investor, as a real estate agent, you actually have to get a license. So you're required to get a real estate license to help people buy or sell their homes. In some cases, you can lose your real estate license. You have to maintain that license. Every 2 years, you have to renew that license. That requires continuing education. So you have to continue to get education to get experience. And then also, if you get into any criminal trouble, let's say even like a DUI, you can lose your license. So they take it pretty seriously. As a traditional real estate investor, I don't think of any state you're required to have a real estate license. So you don't have to have that license. That can be a good or a bad thing depending on how you're looking at it. So real estate agents are required to have a license. An investor traditionally does not have a license. I am both. So I'm actually a real estate investor, but I'm also a real estate broker. So I kind of have the best of both worlds. Now that ties me to a more responsible position. I'm okay with that. I can't take advantage of the public. I'm okay with that. So I'm held to a higher standard, and that's okay. But that's traditionally the difference between a real estate agent and an investor when it comes to having a real estate license. Another difference between real estate agent and investor is real estate agents actually traditionally have access to more data. And when I say that, I mean that they have access to usually the MLS, and that is the premier source of data. What the MLS is the multiple listing service. And there's multiple listing services in every state throughout the country. And in a lot of cases, those states have multiple listing services throughout that state. So different multiple listing services, MLSs for different areas. California, for example, there's a ton of them. Every county, I think, even in some cases, some cities have their own MLSs. Here in the state that I'm at, we're super fortunate. We really only have one giant MLS, and that is a huge, huge benefit because we don't have to pay a bunch of ancillary fees to all these other boards and all these other MLSs. So it also gives us access to that data, the buys, the sells, the under contracts, the expires, the withdrawals, the solds. All of that data is stuff that I use when I can see what the value of a property is. Now, I've been doing real estate for almost 20 years, so I can look at a neighborhood and I can tell you for the most part what I think that property is worth. But having that MLS data to back it up is super important. The difference with an investor is unless they're a real estate agent, they don't have access to the MLS. And so they can't access that data. Now they use third-party applications. They'll use third-party services that gather that data and they compile it for them. I'm not trying to promote any, but let's say PropStream, for example. And so they take that information and they compile it for you. Now here's the downfall to that. The state that I'm in is a non-disclosure state. So we don't disclose that data. They have to pull that data their own. And so you don't have that premier access like a real estate agent does. And so not every state's non-disclosure, but in the state that I'm in, it is. And so that really limits the information that investors can get when they're trying to evaluate deals. So then it comes down to partnering with a real estate agent or becoming savvy enough that you know the market like I do now. You don't necessarily need a real estate agent in that case, but that took me a long time to get there. So those are some of the really big differences between being a real estate agent and being an investor. Let me know what you are. Let me know what you think you want to be. If you think there's a difference between the two and you want to try to dabble in one or the other, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. Make sure you like and subscribe this page and hit the notification button.